Have you ever seen a normally calm person completely lose? What happened? It takes a lot to make my mom yell. On the rare occasions when she did yell, it still felt like she had self-control. Like she yelled on purpose, because there was a reason to yell, like she needed to be that loud for us to hear us, or one of the kids needed to learn to never run into traffic again. But one morning when we were teenagers, my brother was being really difficult. And my very sweet, soft-spoken mother yelled, "God damn it, Sean!" and threw a butter knife down so hard it stuck 1 4-inch deep, in oak hardwood floor. I can still hear the noise it made. We were all very well behaved for the rest of the day. I did eventually ask my mom why she did that. Her explanation was that she felt she was too angry to hold a knife, even a butter knife, and was trying to get it out of her hand before she did something stupid. I worked as a line cook with a chef who I became really good friends with. Really chill dude, easygoing, and super fun to cook with. He taught me most of what I know about cooking, and I owe him a lot for my success. Never really saw him get mad until one day. We were getting slammed during busy night, and one of the servers said something that really ticked him off, not sure if I ever heard what it was. But next thing I knew he had sent the deep fryer basket flying at Mach 1 across the kitchen, nearly missing the dish kid and shattering a light bulb. He stormed off and 5 minutes later, after a smoke break, came back and casually continued cooking as if nothing had happened. He apologized about it the next day, and we never talked about it again. The restaurant industry is a stressful place. When I was in my late teens, I was financially irresponsible and borrowed money from my grandparents to move out of my mom's house. We planned on how I would pay it back in installments, and I only missed 2 payments. With each one I called my granddad and asked if it was okay, and he was always cool about it. One day I got a call from him, and he was livid, screaming at me on the phone, and I could hear my grandmother crying in the background. He was the angriest I've ever heard anyone in my life, and I was terrified. He wanted to know why I hadn't made the payment that month, but I was sure I had. It turns out I had accidentally set the automated payment to be drawn from the wrong account, and it hadn't done it. It was an honest mistake on my part, and I explained that to him. I transferred the money immediately, and he instantly calmed down. I later found out he had become an alcoholic after he quit smoking, and he would talk to my grandmother like that regularly when no one was around. I had a friend who was in his 60s, a functioning alcoholic, but he was the calmest and composed guy I have ever known. He never used to raise his voice or swear. Everything was done with meticulous precision. He once explained to me that if you use vulgar language and shout all the time, then you will have nowhere to go when you really do get angry. I had worked with him for about 3 years, never heard him raise his voice or swear before. The week before he had been shafted on his pay, and the manager promised to get it sorted by Friday. Friday rolled around and it had not been sorted. So when my friend walked up to the manager in the open office and declared loudly, "Where the hell is my money? You promised this would be resolved," the whole office went silent, and the look of fear on the manager's face was haunting. The money was in his account by the end of the day. This is not my story but my dad's. Growing up, his best friend Leaf was a quiet and shy guy that was a bit socially awkward. In school he wasn't physically bullied, but this one kid teased him constantly. This would have been early 60s, so kids were expected to just tough it out. My dad would usually confront the kid, but one day a girl runs up to him and says that Leaf and the kid are fighting. My dad runs over to save Leaf, but when he breaks through the circle he finds the bully flat on his back, Leaf sitting on his chest, holding him by the ears and smashing his head into the pavement over and over. My dad tackles him, wrestles him to the ground and screams at him, asking what he's doing. The thing that stayed with me from that story was how he described it. It was like there was nothing in there. I felt like I could see the back of his skull through his eyes. Luckily they were kids, so the damage was serious but limited. The bully escaped with stitches and a concussion, and Leaf had to talk to the school's psychologist. My dad and Leaf stayed best friends, and when I met him as an adult, he was still quiet but less shy and awkward. My dad is the most mild-mannered person I have ever met. He is the most composed, level-headed man I know. I once saw him trip in our garage and land in a bucket of nails and screws to realize he had one lodged into his kneecap. He looked over at me and said, "Don't tell you mom, she'll overreact," while he grabbed a pair of pliers and yanked out the screw. But when something happened to my special needs brother, he would get this sparkle in his eye that could scare a Navy SEAL. When I was 8 years old, my parents took my brother and I to eat at a restaurant, which was kind of a big deal because my brother was recently diagnosed with a degenerative physical health issue which was racking up huge medical debts, all while my dad lost his job after getting the bends on a work dive. We went to our favorite Mexican restaurant in town and parked in the handicapped spot nearest the front door. I still remember having an unusually light-hearted time in which I could see my parents' stress level subside and listen to funny stories about the past. We simply enjoyed a memorable dinner with lots of laughter. Looking back, I realized this was a big expense that my parents probably couldn't afford and sacrifice so we could have a normal night as a family. When we left the restaurant, We found a car parked next to us, not in a parking spot but in the yellow stripes immediately next to our van. Normally this might not be an issue, but my brother is in a wheelchair, and we had a folding ramp, not the hydraulic lifts that you see today, but a heavy metal powder-coated ramp. This was a Friday night, so traffic was crazy busy and my parents didn't feel comfortable just backing up into the street to load my brother, so my dad went into the restaurant to see if the manager could find the owner of the car and ask him to move. When my dad emerged from the restaurant, I saw a look that I have never seen before. It was one of focus, determination, and rage. He looked at my mom and told her to get in the car. She just hopped in and said, "Okay," in a way that indicated she knew something might go down. He turned to me and said, "Watch this." He unfolded the ramp and slammed it on the roof of the car next to us, then turned to explain that the manager told him, "I'm not responsible for what happens in the parking lot. Why don't you just figure something out?" So he did. We waited for a minute, and the manager came out yelling, "What are you doing? You can't do that." This was when my dad lost it. At this point he picked up my brother's wheelchair with him in it, which weighed about 150 to 200 pounds, and sat him on the hood of the car while yelling at the manager. He then jumped on the hood of the car and then picked my brother up to put him on the roof of the car, still giving the manager the business. He jumped up to the roof and calmly rolled my brother across the ramp and into our van, told me to get in, and calmly told the manager, "I figured something out." Since that day I have never seen anything remotely close to the same level of anger from him. We laugh about the story from time to time, and my dad is always quick to say that he overreacted, but I think he reacted just fine. We had what we now refer to as the Jerry Springer Christmas when I was 7 or so. One aunt hated her sister-in-law and started screaming at her, then shoving started and husbands got involved, then it just continued to devolve from there. My mom went straight into mediator mode and tried to calm everyone down, but it wasn't working. She decided to come check on us kids and found my cousin and me holding each other and sobbing because we were scared. The next thing I hear is her scary mom voice screaming over everyone, "Listen here, you My kid is in there crying on Christmas because her family can't keep their shit together for the one day a year when we all see each other. You're going to march your asses into that room single file and apologize to each kid individually, then you're going to shut the hell up until I get them out of here. We're going to go look at Christmas lights, and this family better be the picture of goddamn Christmas joy by the time we get back." My mom never really cussed in front of me and only ever did when things were really bad. That side of the family didn't celebrate Christmas for a few years after that. I had a master sergeant at one of my units in the army. Dude was half asleep most of the time. I don't think I ever heard him talk more than once. One day all the guys get called into the large classroom and he's in there looking upset. He launches into a rant about how easy it is to pee into the toilet instead of on the ground in front of it. Drew a stick figure diagram all angrily showing how you use one hand to stabilize and aim into the toilet. I had to keep from laughing because he seemed like he was about to blow his lid. Mechanic I worked with is getting verbally abused by a customer claiming he ripped him off. Guys going off saying all sorts of racist things, then stepped up like he was going to swing. Henry beat him to the punch literally. Then he calmly walked to the back office and called the cops on himself. My high school history teacher was great, always cool and collected. Really one of the best teachers I've ever had. He also happened to be a former U.S. Army Special Forces. One day we were in class and all us kids were being rowdy, obnoxious, and not paying attention in the least. All it took was him snapping with a "Shut the hell up!" for the entire room to go silent. He went right back to teaching, but there's still some heavy tension in the air. After a few minutes he apologized for losing his temper, but someone in our group collectively apologized for us and told him it was totally our fault. Only time I've ever seen a room full of teenagers humbled like that. One time in high school, a couple bullies were up in this other kid's face. Dude was just sitting there with no expression and staring straight ahead, clearly not hearing a thing. One of the bullies inched closer, and the kid decked him as hard as he could in the face. The bully was knocked to the floor, speechless with his nose bleeding everywhere. The kid then calmly stood up, still with no emotion, calmly packed his things, and made his own way to the principal's office as if nothing at all had happened. It's still one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. It was like right out of a movie. One of my coworkers is a calm, quiet, easygoing dude. We had a receptionist at the time who was terrible. She would constantly leave the front desk phones unattended. We would have to stop mid-service to answer them ourselves and check people in and out. One day, she does the same thing. The phones are ringing, people waiting, and she's nowhere to be seen. He just does a big sigh, and screams her name in the loudest, angriest and most fed-up scream. She scurried her trifling little ass back up to the front in seconds like a little cockroach that knew it messed up. Opposite story, but I've seen a very reactive person become completely calm. And that's when I realize things are very bad. My father is very reactive and agitated easily. It doesn't take much to set him off. When our country was going through war, there was a city that had a big strategic importance. He participated in liberating it. In 2020 I remember the night we lost that city. I never seen my father so quiet and calm in my life. And it actually sent chills down my spine more than seeing him agitated ever did. The part that made me scared was I expected him to be angry. But seeing him so quiet was so odd it was scary. Boy, do I have a story. I've been in the US Coast Guards for a few years now, and along the way I met a really calm guy named Joe. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He's soft-spoken yet still authoritative when need be. Always is nice to others and works very hard. Then there's another worker, we'll call her Jill. Jill is a power trip, annoying, loud, disrespectful to anyone lower ranking than her, always talking about her definitely fakesy stories. I could go on for days about her. Anyways, one day on duty, Joe and his crew were out on a rescue case for over 6 hours throughout the whole night. Him and the crew got back to the station at 2 or 3 a.m. They were so tired they collapsed on the couches in the lounge, which is connected to the training room, which is divided by a folding partition you can pull out of the wall. Well, morning came and there was a note on door to the big room. Crew is sleeping from late night case. Do not disturb. Of course, Jill completely ignored the note, busted into the room, turned on all the lights, talking and laughing way too loud at 7:30 in the morning. She started to tell a ridiculous sea story which always starts with, "So when I was stationed," and immediately Joe shoots up like a rocket from the couch, and walks towards the partition in the wall mumbling things under his breath. He was vigorously fighting the partition, yanking it from the wall and pulling it across the 20-foot-long rail. Jill is watching him, and as he's almost done, she goes, "I can leave if you want." Completely unwarranted, Joe says. "That's what the damn door is for." He closes the partition and lays back down. No one said a word, but I think everyone gained a little more respect for Joe that day.